delve into the recent developments between Ukraine and Russia, we see a dramatic escalation, one that could alter the course of the conflict. Ukraine's daring incursion into Russia's Kursk Oblast was not just an act of defiance but a strategic gamble, one that now seems to be backfiring with potentially devastating consequences. On Wednesday, Russian troops advanced deeper into eastern Ukraine, seizing control of the village of Novo Rivka. This gain positions them within just 5 miles of Pokrovsk, a city that's been a focal point of Russia's nearly year-long eastern offensive. The significance of this advance cannot be overstated, as it brings Russian forces closer to achieving a key military objective, a feat that could have far-reaching implications across the entire Eastern Front. Ukraine, however, finds itself in a precarious position. The Ukrainian military, already stretched thin, has few reserves to reinforce the defenses around Pokrovsk. This situation is further complicated by a bold, some would say risky, maneuver executed a month ago, Ukraine's surprise invasion of Russia's Kursk Oblast. This operation drew thousands of Ukrainian troops away from the Eastern Front, where they are sorely needed. Ukrainian leaders are now coming to terms with the gravity of their decision. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a sobering address, admitted the severity of the situation on the Pokrovsk front. The situation is extremely difficult, Zelensky stated, as the battle for Pokrovsk intensifies. But how did we get here? To understand the current dilemma, we must revisit the events leading up to this critical moment. The looming battle for Pokrovsk is, in many ways, an extension of the brutal fight for Avdiivka earlier this year. Avdiivka, located just 24 miles east of Pokrovsk, was a fortress that stood as a bulwark against Russian advances. However, when the Ukrainian garrison in Avdiivka ran out of ammunition in mid-February, it was forced to retreat, an outcome directly linked to a protracted blockade of U.S. military aid to Ukraine. This blockade was driven by Russia-friendly lawmakers in the U.S. Congress, who sought to stymie Ukraine's defense efforts. The fall of Avdiivka exposed the logistical infrastructure of western Ukraine to Russian assaults. These assaults, while costly for the Russian forces, have nevertheless persisted. The Kremlin, seemingly unfazed by the staggering loss of life and equipment, is willing to trade thousands of lives for a shot at Pokrovsk. And it's easy to see why. Pokrovsk is not just another city, it sits at a crucial crossroads of multiple railroad lines. This strategic location makes it a vital supply hub for Ukrainian forces defending a broad front, stretching from Volodar to the north of Donetsk. Losing Pokrovsk would weaken Ukrainian defenses across the Eastern Front, paving the way for a broader Russian advance that could potentially lead to the full occupation of Donetsk Oblast. So why did the Ukrainian command, under the leadership of General Alexander Syrsky, opt to launch a large-scale invasion into Kursk Oblast? The decision baffled many observers. With thousands of troops drawn from at least 8 brigades, the invasion appeared to be a bold move, perhaps too bold. The question on everyone's mind was, why weren't those troops reinforcing the vulnerable Pokrovsk front instead? One theory suggests that the Kursk invasion was intended as a diversion, designed to pull Russian forces away from the Eastern Front and relieve pressure on Pokrovsk. If this was the strategy, it has not succeeded. The pro-Ukraine conflict intelligence team concluded that the Kursk operation failed to prompt any significant redeployment of Russian troops from the Donetsk region. Instead, it exacerbated the shortage of Ukrainian personnel where they were most needed. Rather than diverting their best troops to counter the Ukrainian incursion in Kursk, the Kremlin cobbled together a makeshift force, comprising young, poorly trained conscripts, to slow the Ukrainian advance. While these reinforcements have managed to stall Ukraine's progress, the critical outcome for Russia has been the preservation of its main forces in the east. 3 weeks into Ukraine's Kursk invasion, the ramifications are becoming clear. The Russian offensive in the east is not just continuing but gaining momentum. The capture of Novo Rivka, which some analysts predicted would take days, was accomplished with alarming speed. This rapid advance places the already outnumbered Ukrainian brigades defending Pokrovsk in an increasingly dire situation. As it stands, the Ukrainian defenders in Pokrovsk face a stark reality. Outnumbered by Russian forces, they might soon be forced to surrender the city unless reinforcements arrive quickly. The conflict intelligence team has warned that without immediate action, Russian troops could be on the outskirts of Pokrovsk within weeks, not months as previously estimated. So what options does Ukraine have? Military analysts suggest several potential moves to stabilize the front line. These include deploying newly formed brigades, repositioning forces from the Kursk and Kharkiv areas, or pulling battalions for more stable fronts. However, whether the Ukrainian command will take these steps remains to be seen. One possible hope for Ukraine lies in the possibility of bleeding the Russian forces to the point where they can no longer sustain their advance. The Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategies reports that enemy losses on the Pokrovsk front have remained at record highs for the past 5 weeks. Hundreds of Russian soldiers and dozens of vehicles are being lost daily, but the critical question remains: how long can Russia sustain such high losses before its military capacity begins to crumble? Last year, in a fit of optimism, the Estonian Defense Ministry predicted that Ukraine could turn the tide of the war by inflicting 100,000 casualties on Russian forces in 2024. Yet, by all accounts, Ukraine likely reached that grim milestone within the first 6 months of the year, and still, Russia presses on. As the battle for Pokrovsk looms ever closer, we are left to reflect on the course of this war and the decisions that have shaped it. Ukraine's invasion of Kursk may have been a bold gamble, a diversion intended to shift the balance in its favor. But with the benefit of hindsight, it appears that this move has only deepened the crisis on the Eastern Front. War is unpredictable, shaped by the decisions of generals and the valor of soldiers on the ground. As Ukraine and Russia continue their brutal struggle, the world watches, wondering what the next chapter will bring. The battle for Pokrovsk and the outcomes of these strategic gambles may well determine the future of the conflict and, ultimately, the fate of both nations. Thank you for watching. For more in-depth analysis and updates on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay informed and stay tuned as we continue to cover this unfolding story.